Live, Formula One.
Is it me, or is it a bit hot? Maybe a bit too hot. Some might declare a heat hazard off track. And on it, is the championship heating up? Are Ferrari and Hamilton well and truly in the fight? Can Mercedes get on top of their reliability issues? And is the driver market about to kick off? All that and more to be discussed on your Checkered Flag preview ahead of the Austrian Grand Prix with myself, Harry Benjamin, BBC F1 correspondent Andrew Benson, and racing driver Abby Eaton. But before all of that, Abby, you've raced here at the Red Bull Ring several times in W Series, nestled in the beautiful Styrian Hills. Is it a fun track?
It is very much a fun track. You've got these long straights into super heavy braking zones, and sector 3 you've got some super fast corners where you need a bit of bravery, to be fair, out the back. And it's a wicked circuit, and as you said, it's beautiful setting.
How many corners are you counting, Andrew?
I think 7, isn't it, the real number? They've got 10 down on the official circuit map, but yeah, 7 for me.
Well, we will get into everything that will be coming our way for this weekend. First and foremost, let's bring you up to speed with how the championship standings look coming into what is round 8 of the Formula One World Championship, and it is Kimi Antonelli who sits at the top of the standings with 156 points. He's 41 clear of Lewis Hamilton in the Ferrari, who's a further 9 points clear of George Russell. Charles Leclerc and Lando Norris round out the top 5. Mercedes lead the way in the constructors. They have 262 points. They're 72 clear of Ferrari, with McLaren, Red Bull and Alpine making up the top 5 in the constructors. So it's looking tight. We're going to talk a little bit about the Mercedes reliability, and I think that's the reason I'm kind of trying to big up this championship almost being supercharged again, because we are off the back of what is a race that will go down in the history books, Andrew, as Lewis Hamilton winning his first race for Ferrari at Barcelona just a couple of weeks out. And there was no luck involved. It was speed, and it was a pure moment for him and Ferrari announcing themselves in this championship fight.
Well, you used the word close a few seconds ago, didn't you, Harry? It's not close yet, but there's the potential for it to be close. That victory was obviously a historic moment, as you say, and also a statement from Hamilton. We'd already seen this year that he was back to pretty close to his best after a very difficult opening season for Ferrari last year, when he was clearly publicly doubting himself many times after qualifying sessions and races. He's back to normal basically this year, and this was the final confirmation of that. It was a typical Hamilton drive, different strategy from Mercedes. He was on it all race. He kept the pressure on them. They got a bit of help with a safety car around about the sort of 2/3 point of the race, but I think Mercedes thought that Hamilton would have beaten them anyway. He would just have had to have passed both their drivers, or one of them, depending on when they retired. And when he caught them, and Lando Norris's McLaren on, if the strategies had played out without that safety car. Totally on merit. And it raised the question, didn't it? 41 points he reduced the gap to championship leader Kimi Antonelli, and he's splitting the Mercedes drivers in the championship after George Russell's run of bad luck. Can he keep it going? And I think this race and the next 2 in Silverstone and Spa, they're circuits that are not dissimilar in character. They're sort of power circuits, fast circuits, where Ferrari have been struggling so far this year. Barcelona is different. It's all long duration corners. So if Ferrari, with the help of an engine upgrade that comes in to play this weekend and carries forward, if that, in addition to the chassis upgrades that they introduced in Spain, can close that gap so that he becomes a consistent challenger to Mercedes rather than an occasional one, then yes, the championship's on.
Yeah, Abby, would you agree with that? Because as Andrew says, it feels like this has been brewing for Hamilton and Ferrari, and now off the back of those aerodynamic upgrades and engine upgrade for this weekend, it feels like it has been brewing. This isn't a surprise.
No, I think we've seen a bit of a different attitude from Lewis this year. He just seems to be hungry for it. I think it looks like he's gelling with the car more. As you say, Andrew, it's the old Hamilton that we see on track now. And, it seems to have just put a spring in his step. And he's mentioned previously in interviews that he's never trained so hard in the off-season. He's never been more hungry. And, he has doubted himself, publicly over the last year. So, and actually, it was quite uncomfortable to see at times, how much kind of lack of confidence he had in himself. So, it's nice to see him back on top form, and it's nice to have another manufacturer up there in the championship battle.
Well, it was certainly a very popular win with the fans, with the media, and even his fellow drivers.
I wasn't expecting that for sure, and it was really appreciated because I think ultimately, I think I have so much respect for all the drivers that show up every weekend, experience the highs and lows, the criticism, the positives, and they still continue to show up with a brave face and do what they do to the best of their ability. And we're competitors and we all want to beat each other on track, and none of us are happy with not finishing ahead of the other. But to see we have GPA is a tight-knit group of drivers, more close than I think I would imagine any other generation, maybe at least in the last 20 years. And so it was really special to see the support from them, yeah.
Is there any realistic reason why you couldn't realistically challenge for that championship?
I think the opportunity is there, but it's one thing being there, and then there's another thing all galvanizing the troops and developing. You can hit plateaus in terms of development, all sorts. So all we can do is just take it one day at a time. All we can do is really continue to bring everything. Everyone brings something to the table in this team, and everyone back at the factory is working so hard. They see what's possible, and when you see what's possible, it kind of gives you, it's like a North Star. Okay, that's the direction we need to go. And whether or not the team's had that for a while, I'm not sure, but obviously last year we didn't have really a North Star, and this year we have it. So everyone's doubling down, everyone's putting that extra bit of work in, even more than what they've ever done before. And I think it's really starting to show in the stuff that's coming through this weekend. We do have a new engine. It's a step. It's not the whole gap, but it's a step. It's 1 foot forwards, which I'm really, really proud and thankful for. And still, Mercedes are the team to win, to beat. They've won everything else, and they've been just incredible this year. They've got a great car. It's an amazing team, World Championship team. So we have a real battle on our hands, and it's going to take absolutely everyone full hands on deck for the rest of the year to even come close to competing with them. But I don't think it's impossible.
Lewis Hamilton speaking there off the back of that historic win in Barcelona a couple of weeks ago. And I think what you can be forgiven, I think, if you're a Ferrari fan, every year you get your hopes up. It's going to be Ferrari's year. It's a bit of a running joke. But for me, what seems to have changed this year is it's the second season of Hamilton at Ferrari. He's done the hard learning. He's come into not just any other team, but an institution, but he's bringing more and more of the right people around him. One of those people being Carlos Santi, his race engineer, who he even referred to as sort of the Italian Bono, Pete Bonington, his engineer at Mercedes. It wasn't only Hamilton's first win for Ferrari, it was Carlos' first win with Hamilton at the wheel. So that is clearly a crucial partnership, which at the start of this year, and still supposedly is temporary, but how important is that relationship between driver and engineer, and getting all of the right cogs turning to challenge for what could be an 8th world title?
Yeah, it's a massive team. F1, it's not just all about the driver, and having that bond with your team, having the bond with the engineer is really, really crucial. And the first year of Lewis with Ferrari, he will have been finding his feet with the team. Obviously, Ferrari are kind of renowned for doing things as Ferrari want to do them. And ultimately, there's going to be a little bit of kind of give and take from the team, from Lewis. And it's about finding that happy medium in the middle where you get the good mix of what Ferrari bring that is brilliant and also what Lewis brings that is brilliant. And I think it's really, Lewis is very good at creating a team and that teamwork environment that Ferrari, I think, as he alluded to in that interview, were potentially lacking, that North Star that they were lacking last year.
Yeah, and so just on Carlos Santi, the race engineer, he was, as you say, Harry, meant to be a temporary instalment for this season, but I was asked Ferrari earlier this week whether what the plans were, and they basically said they're getting on well and there's no plans to change. So it sounds like it's not an absolute given, but it sounds like they'll stick together for at least the rest of this year, which makes sense when you've got a relationship that works well between a driver and an engineer. And that's one of the many facets with which Hamilton was struggling at Ferrari last year, because he constantly and still does say that Riccardo Adami, his previous engineer, was a really nice guy, but he's trying to find ways to not be mean about him, but clearly they didn't gel in the way that drivers and engineers need to for the most productive kind of relationship.
Is he then in contention for a world title this year?
I think it's too early to say definitively one way or the other. If they can be consistently competitive in the next 3 races, because of the reasons I said before, then I would say absolutely yes. If they can't, and Mercedes continue to dominate in the way that they did up to Spain, well, I don't see a reason to say. I don't see a reason in that case to say yes.
But with the way the Ferrari car operates, what is it about this year in Ferrari that seems to have gone fairly well? Because I think you haven't seen before from Ferrari this kind of level of innovation and development before from them.
Well, actually, I would take issue with you on that. So fundamentally, Ferrari hoped that this change of regulations, let's not forget, this was the biggest regulation change in Formula 1 history coming into this year. Wholly new cars, wholly new engines. They hoped that it would mean a chance for them to get back to the front, because clearly in the previous regulation set, the ground effect era, we'll call it, from 2022 to 2025, they never, apart from at the very beginning, they never really got on top of it. So, but I think what's interesting about Ferrari, actually, when you go back, they have often responded in recent history quite well to a regulation change. So, for example, 2017, when the wider cars were first introduced, they were the most competitive car for 2/3 of that season, and many people think that Sebastian Vettel and Ferrari that year should have won the championship, and Mercedes definitely picked up pace in the end of the year, but they dropped the ball in a few ways, both driver and team. And the same thing happened in 2018, when they were also very, very competitive for most of the season, and again, too many mistakes from driver and team. And then again in 2022, they started that year, new regulations, fastest car. Then they got overtaken by Red Bull. Again, so this is the 3rd regulation set in a row that they've started with a good car. What they hadn't done this year was get the engine right. But with this first upgrade now, and they're allowed a second upgrade this year, according to the latest rules, stipulations in terms of engine performance, which are still up in the air and still debated by Red Bull, so they're not completely set in stone. If that engine progress and then the next engine progress allows them to keep pace with Mercedes, and Hamilton can carry on driving in the way that he is, then they can be championship contenders. But it's 1 win out of 7, the 7 of which before Mercedes won them all. And let's not forget, 1 week before Barcelona in Monaco, Ferrari didn't have their upgrade. Kimi Antonelli absolutely smashed it that weekend on a track that typically you would have expected to favour Ferrari.
I take all of that, but also I think this year you have to give credence to reliability more than we ever have done before, and that is biting Mercedes more so than not. And Abby, when you look at it and Hamilton's results, 2nd place in Canada, 2nd place in Monaco, the win in Barcelona, sitting 2nd in the Drivers' Championship, we're at round 8 of the championship now. I think you say he's a championship contender.
I think so. It is still quite early in the season, but we all love a fight and we all love Ferrari. So I'm with you. I'm the optimist, and I'm going to say they are going to be in the championship fight.
When do we stop saying we're quite early into the season? What number?
Hang on,
what do we
at
get
now?
to? We're at 8.
We're not even at halfway yet. Come on. We've still got more to go.
It is the definition of early, but it's trending towards not early anymore, isn't it?
We're not halfway yet.
Everything but saying the obvious.
I mean, look, we still don't know how many races are going to be.
That is also a very good point. Well, look, I just think if you see 2nd at this point in the championship, you must be doing something right. But I do think it's because we've had these moments with Hamilton last year from the sprint win in China, and we all suddenly thought, here we go, this is it, and then it just didn't happen. But this year, he's beating Charles Leclerc in the head-to-heads pretty much with everything. It may be a small margin, but he's still ahead. Luck comes into it as well, but there's no denying he is in a much more comfortable and better place than he has been so far in his Ferrari
So
career.
let's not forget, this is statistically the greatest racing driver the world has ever seen. And typically in his championship years with Mercedes, he was always amazing, right? But he didn't always start the season in his absolute best form. But when he gets a sniff of something, and I think the greats, this happens to the greats, it's almost like they find another level in themselves. They kind of double down, and the commitment, they just create an extra force, if you like. And Toto Wolff acknowledged that in his press conference after Barcelona on the Sunday evening, where he said, I don't want to be in a championship fight with him because I've seen what he can do in those situations. And it does feel like in the last few races he's getting that sort of momentum. And he's a very formidable force when he gets in that mindset and feels, momentum with him. And that's definitely what he feels right now. But the question is always in Formula One, how can the car take you with it? And ultimately, it's very hard to win a championship not in the best car, even if you're a driver of the caliber of Lewis Hamilton, or it doesn't happen very often, but to take a previous Ferrari championship contender, Fernando Alonso, 2 years, 2010 and 2012, he drove out of his skin to be in the championship fight against a superior car, but they just fell short in the end, because it's so much harder to do it when you're fighting without the equipment. And until Spain, he didn't have the commitment. That's why I'm a little bit cautious.
No, that's okay. We'll let you off. But where, Abby, does this leave the dynamic between the two drivers at Ferrari?
I think if Lewis keeps performing as he is and Charles keeps potentially having the problems or making the mistakes, that struggle between is there a number one driver, is there a number two driver, are they going to let them both race and treat them the same if they get up to each other on the circuit? I think that's going to develop as the season goes on, similar to what we've seen with Mercedes. And it's going to be all down to performance, really. Obviously, at the moment, Lewis is second in the championship, and Charles is down in fourth. But yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see how the outright pace, and as you mentioned, Andrew, about the consistency that potentially Ferrari could have found with the development on the engine side of it this weekend. And obviously we've seen the performance increase from the aero previously.
And just to make the final point on this topic, in the context of the fight between Leclerc and Hamilton and just how close it is.
Yeah.
Yes, Charles Leclerc has had a difficult couple of races in Canada and Monaco, and then he had the retirement in Spain. He's been struggling with the braking characteristics of the car, which is also related to Hamilton, because there's been a few changes on that front driven by Hamilton. And yes, Hamilton's ahead on the qualifying head-to-head in terms of who beat who how many times. But actually, on average pace, Leclerc is still slightly quicker over the season by 0.025 seconds. That's how close it is.
But the points are scored on Sunday. Well, I'm really looking forward to see how this unfolds. But what is interesting is, mentioned it at the top, where kind of the contenders come into play here, and the reliability issues, because Hamilton sits second in a Mercedes sandwich in the Drivers' Championship right now. Mercedes are battling their own problems. They've clearly got a good car, but they've got consistent issues with what appears to be the battery side of their power unit. So how does that fare into all of this? Do Mercedes have to start looking over their shoulders at Ferrari and going, well, Kimi's quite far ahead still. Do we need to back a horse?
It's not there yet.
Too early.
It's too early. Abby says we're still early in the season. Wise
I
words.
would agree with you on that.
But, of course, if that continues down the line and there's still a fight going on, eventually they get to a point where they have to ask themselves that question, but they're not there yet. The issue is the battery, as you say, and it's not just affecting the Mercedes factory team, it's affected all the Mercedes engine teams. Some of them actually worse than the Mercedes Works team. But Russell and Antonelli have both had problems that have caused their retirements as a consequence of this. Russell in Canada, Antonelli in Spain. Lando Norris has been hit badly by it in McLaren. Alex Albon's been hit badly by it at Williams. The only team that haven't really is Alpine for some reason. But they've got a new battery pack being introduced this weekend in Austria, with the aim of addressing this reliability problem, which they've had to develop without the data from Russell's car, by the way, from Canada, because that's still coming back on a boat, believe it or not, or a ship maybe. But Norris and Albon don't have it because they've already had too many failures, and if they'd taken it this weekend, it would have meant a grid penalty, which it'll mean eventually when they take it, but they just didn't want to do that this weekend.
But when it comes to sort of what we're seeing this year, I'm quite liking the reliability issues, because for years, Abby, the cars have been relatively bulletproof. You'd see all cars starting and all cars finishing. Now it's really throwing up some interesting results. Some teams are being able to score big points when they wouldn't necessarily be able to. And actually, the late retirements in Barcelona for Antonelli and well, Antonelli mainly, also for Leclerc, in a way, if you're sat on the sofa, and for all of us, were actually a bit of a good thing, because it's just closed that championship battle up. Yeah,
it adds another element of kind of jeopardy, and also thinking about looking after the car. And as you say, selfishly as a viewer, it's a little bit like wacky races. You know, you think it's done, and then the last 5-10 minutes we have a couple of retirements. So it just adds that extra little bit of uncertainty. You know, as we previously know from other years, when the same person's winning all the time, you said the same cars are finishing from start to finish all through the race, it gets a little bit monotonous. So, you know, this year's really shaken things up, obviously, with the regulation changes, and naturally with that and all the new technology that's on board, you're going to have reliability issues. And yeah, for us as a viewer, it just adds that extra little bit of something to focus on.
If you're George Russell and you look back on that Barcelona weekend, yeah, you put it on pole, yeah, you gained points in your teammate, ultimately through his retirement, but actually you were overtaken on the track through pace of your teammate being superior. How do you feel? How do you go into Austria this weekend? It
will hurt his ego a little bit being done on track, but I think if he's thinking about things with a sensible head on, he should look that actually, you know, he has broken the cycle in terms of quali. He was the quickest car on the Saturday, and you know, ultimately he was able to bring it home in second place due to the failure of Kimi's car. But I think again it's too early to tell in terms of whether he feels he's got the momentum behind him now, where he is in George. And I think once he does feel like he gets a couple of runs of good pace behind him, and he is out qualifying his teammate, and he is out finishing his teammate on circuit without the mechanical failure aiding it, I think he'll start to get a bit more wind behind him, and potentially the fight between the two drivers could hot up more and more.
Well, let's see. It's a short circuit, Austria, which often condenses the field, particularly in qualifying. One of the closest gaps we usually see throughout the year. So let's certainly after practice one, it was incredibly tight between the two Mercedes drivers. Shall we move to McLaren? And I mean, when you take a step back, Abby, and look at this year from them, you know, they haven't nailed it. Is that a consequence of having been battling and putting so much resource in the back end of last year fighting for a championship and ultimately succeeding, but has that come at a cost?
I think probably so, and you see reflections of that in Red Bull's pace or lack of this year as well. It's going to be hard to put all 100% into battling for a championship whilst also thinking about developing for the following year. There will be a lot of that on the go anyway, but in terms of when you've got a team that's trying to focus fully on preparations for the following year with such a big regs change, it's hard to be able to drag someone away from a championship fight to focus on that. So I do think we're seeing remnants of that and repercussions of that. And, you know, this weekend with the free practice one session, having the issues with looking into the upgrades on the car and actually being able to run these upgrades that McLaren have brought, that's going to hurt as well. So it seems like they are a little bit on the back foot so far in 2026.
Do you rule Lando Norris out of defending his title this year? Or is it too early to say?
How many points is he behind?
So Lando Norris sits fifth in the championship, and he's 83 points behind Antonelli.
I think it's going to be tough to get back up there, but having said that, and as we just mentioned, reliability issues, yes, McLaren have been at the brunt of them a little bit, as well as obviously Mercedes, but I think that's going to be an element that could bring them back up into the championship fight as the season goes on.
They've got reliability and performance issues, haven't they? I mean, I think the bottom line is, after Miami, which Norris really should have won, Mercedes made a mistake on the strategy there by letting Antonelli and Mercedes undercut them and get into the lead. It looked like they might be developing some form of, championship potential momentum, because if they could compete there and beat Mercedes on merit, having just introduced an upgrade, which is what happened that weekend, then okay, maybe they could move forward from there and be competitive everywhere else. But that's not what's happened. They weren't competitive in Canada in race, nowhere close. They were not competitive enough in Monaco, and they weren't competitive enough in Spain, although actually Spain gave them a bit of hope, because Norris, although it wasn't really that noticeable because he was like fourth all the time, but he was always in the lead fight, a second or two behind, and actually Norris was in the picture of the strategy of all the questions that were being decided by the strategist during the race as to when to stop, influencing things. So they weren't so far off, and Austria actually is a track where they've traditionally gone quite well. But there's too many question marks about them at the moment, so they need to prove that they can get their competitive pace level up again and get a handle on the reliability issues, which they're not just suffering from Mercedes' problems, they've also got their own issues. Quite consistently happening most weekends, and that's not what McLaren expected themselves. I'm not sure it's completely clear why that's happening, but I would agree with Abby. I think it can't be unrelated to the fact that their championship fight went so late into last year.
Okay, well, we'll keep a track of that and see how they fare this weekend. Now, I teased earlier at the start of the show that the driver market could be something to keep an eye on. It's quietly bubbling away in the background. Because a lot of the drivers are actually out of contract at the end of this season. Now, to Fernando Alonso, and this could be quite a big factor. So the 44-year-old is out of contract with Aston Martin at the end of the year. He said he has no plans to retire, but has hinted he could leave Formula One for another series, admitting he's not enjoying the racing under the current regulations.
I will keep driving because I think you need to stop driving when you feel that you don't enjoy or you don't want to compete. That time didn't arrive yet. I want to compete. I love competing. I love driving. So I will not stop now. It doesn't mean that I will keep going in Formula One. There are many series in motorsport that they are appealing, and Formula One with the current regs is not the same fun as it used to be. So that's maybe the only question that I need to ask myself, if the current Formula One is worth, the time driving and the tight schedule that we are in. But sure, when I stop Formula One, I see myself with Aston Martin, because I believe in the project. I'm part of the project, and I said many times in the past that I think this team has all the ingredients to succeed in the future, and I want to feel that success behind the wheel or not behind the wheel, but I think we need to complete the target.
So case closed, Andrew. He's not going to another team then.
Well, so this is the thing. So Fernando's got a bit bored this year of being asked the same questions every weekend. A, why are Aston Martin rubbish, and when are they not going to be? And B, is he going to retire or not? And he's not hidden the fact that he's got a bit bored, but it's very clear that between him and the Aston Martin team heading into Austria, they made a decision that they were going to try and address this issue, because there have been some reports, not in particularly reputable media outlets, but reports nonetheless, saying that he could go to Alpine next year, which makes a lot of logical sense, because Alpine's a team that he's driven for a lot of times already in the past, and it's run by Flavio Briatore, who is Alonso's manager. And you could see how, for Flavio, it would be appealing to have Fernando back in his team for a whole bunch of reasons, including the old rubbing your fingers thing together, because he gets 20% of his salary. But they clearly wanted to put that idea to bed and to emphasise that he was committed to Aston Martin if he stays in Formula One. And this he said, I want to win a World Championship at Aston Martin with or without driving. That's still the same commitment in my case. We don't know what he's going to do. And the thing is, of course, he'll carry on racing because he loves racing. He wants to go and win Dakar, which he competed in once in 2020, and did a very decent. He was quick in it. He just crashed a bit too often, which can happen in rally raiding when you first go to it. But it's one thing to ask yourself a question about, do I love the Formula One cars? Do I want the schedule, especially given he's just become a father? And it's another thing to forego $30 million a year. Now, he doesn't need $30 million a year because he's already got hundreds of millions of dollars, and anyone only needs to see the videos of his car collection in Monaco of him driving around the streets in one fantastically luxurious car after another. He's just had a
child, though, hasn't he? He might have to upsize in Monaco. That's going to cost a lot, need an extra room. Yes. He's got to think about these things.
And also, now he's 44 or about to be 45 at the end of July. He can't quit Formula One and come back again. So if he quits at the end of this year, that's it. He's not coming back. Whereas he could carry on. And I think my feeling is that he's waiting to see what the Aston Martin upgrade is like. They've held off on their upgrades until a big package that's coming in Spa in 2 races' time. There's a Honda engine upgrade coming at some point in the summer. I had originally heard it would be at Zandvoort after the summer break. There's now murmurings it might even be ready for Spa, or something might be ready for Spa as well. So I think if he sees genuine progress from Aston Martin, and let's not forget Adrian Newey is there running the technical department, the greatest designer in F1 history, and having finally got a chance to work with Adrian Newey, by the way, after 25 years of trying, it would be a brave person who then walked away from working with Adrian Newey if they still wanted to race in Formula One. I think if they can show that they can make a step forward with the upgrades, I think he'll be minded to stay, even though he really doesn't like these hybrid cars that have been introduced this year. He really doesn't like them. He's made that very clear. I just think he'll find it too hard to step away if he gets a sense of Aston Martin making serious forward progress. But that's a big if. We don't know the answer to that question yet. I think we just have to wait a little bit longer to see. So there's going to be a lot of eyes on that new Aston Martin, which is effectively a new car in the Belgian Grand Prix.
I could see Alonso coming back as a team boss if he left. And I believe Aston have a team principal vacancy, don't they? Could you imagine that?
It would be
leaving the driving, but then he's going to come back and be the boss.
It would be so much fun having Fernando Alonso as a team principal, wouldn't it? Just imagine.
He'd still get to work with Newey. He'd have the final say on everything. I don't know, maybe. But I suppose it's not only Fernando Alonso, Abby, that's clearly not happy with the regulations. It's Max Verstappen as well. Continue that. Those conversations have been going, but they are changing. But with the way Red Bull's performing at the moment as well, with both Verstappen and Hadjar, it's up and down, and it's not where they want to be. He's a real big hook in this driver market.
Yeah, and he's not shied away from saying, look, if this doesn't get better, if the cars don't get more towards, flat out racing that we're all hungry for, then he's been doing a lot of endurance racing. He's been racing GT3s, and I know he has aspirations to go in a little bit like Alonso, try and tick many other races and championships off the list. And it would be a shame if F1 were to lose Max, I think. But it will be a real gain for all the other echelons of motorsport out there for him to go and experience it.
So I think the prospect of Verstappen quitting F1, which was relatively real around Japan time, when he was saying, I'm thinking about my future, has kind of receded. He's happy to see that the F1 rule makers have moved the engine regulations in the right direction. There's a change for next year and another change for 2028 to try and get back to more flat-out racing with the engines, because the big issue that both Alonso and Verstappen have is there's too much not on the limit aspect to qualifying at the moment because of the energy management requirements. The question for Verstappen more at the moment, I think, is whether he stays at Red Bull or not. He is under contract till the end of 2028, but he does have a performance clause in his contract that the way Red Bull are going at the moment means he definitely will be free if he wants to be at the end of this year, or by a certain point whenever the clause comes into action. But the question is, does he stay or does he go? If he wants to leave, the obvious destination is Mercedes. George Russell yesterday he has a little session with a select few British media, which I happened to miss yesterday, but I've seen the quotes. Normally I go. And he said he was 100% certain that he would go that he would be at Mercedes next year, which is kind of saying, well, Max isn't coming, but because Russell signed a new contract last winter, which he says has clauses in it which mean that if he meets certain requirements, he's locked in. But we all know that a contract in Formula 1 is not worth the paper it's written on if people really want to change. So we still don't know what's going on there, but you could see why Verstappen would find Mercedes appealing. And Toto Wolff, after all, has been courting Max Verstappen pretty publicly for the last 2 or 3 years. Hasn't landed him yet, but maybe he'll get his date one day.
I feel like the whole driver market is just bubbling and it's going to explode at any moment. So we'll keep tabs on that as we go. But I think that just about does it for our preview of the weekend. Just to finish, I think, Abby and Andrew, with some predictions. Who's going to run well here? Who is your pick for the win? Benny?
I think Mercedes will be in charge here, and I think Antonelli will win.
Abby?
Can I be boring and agree with Benson?
Yeah, you're allowed to do that.
Same.
If you want to be boring, but
Yeah,
fine.
sorry, I'm boring today.
I'm going to go for...
You've got to go Hamilton.
I know,
after all that.
I'm like, come on, you've got to do.
I'm going to go for Hamilton. I am. I'm not 100% backing myself on that front, but to be different, I'm going to go Hamilton for back-to-back wins. Wouldn't that be something? Right.
It would be.
It
then,
would be.
Then we can talk about the championship.
Then it's not too early. I'll tell you what isn't early, though. This podcast is probably actually a bit late, so we'll call it there. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Abby. The Austrian Grand Prix is across BBC Sounds and the 5 Live network this weekend. You can hear the race live on 5 Live, lights out, from 2 o'clock in the afternoon. This has been an IMG production for BBC Radio 5 Live.